Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jennifer Schmidt, and today I'll be going over what's new in the eForms Update 3/2019. So this is a new update, which is available in Therefore Online. For people who are using installed versions of Therefore, this will be available with the update roll-up coming up early next year. So today we are all using WebEx event platform. This means that all the participants on the call are muted. So if you have a question, type it into the question box down below, and I'll be answering all the questions at the very end of my presentation. What are we going to be going over today? What's on the agenda? First, I'll be going over the new eForms features. This includes uploading an image, saving a draft form, and pre-populating fields with HTML parameters. Next, I'll be going over some other eForm features that aren't necessarily new, but they might be underutilized. They might be new for you. And then finally, I'll be going over e-signatures, which is a really nifty new feature. It's not for eForms, but it's very interesting and it has so many great use cases. So I wanted to make sure that you guys know that it's available. And before I start, I just wanted to mention I'll be recording this call, so I'll be able to make the recording available on the extranet and on YouTube a little bit later. So please ask your questions, and know that all of this will be recorded so you can pass it on to your friends and colleagues in a few days. All right, so first things first, we are going to be talking about adding an image to a form. If you remember, it was previously possible to add images to eForms. The catch was that those images had to be already on the web, and so the way it was done using HTML. We just referenced the image with a little bit of HTML code, and the image then was put onto the form. But again, it wasn't directly uploaded, so it wasn't uploaded as like a JPEG or a PNG. It was already on the internet, and it was just being referenced in the form. But now it's possible to upload the image directly onto the eForm. So the way that you do this is you do it via the file component, and you have to upload the image then directly into the form and select base64 as the storage and this display as image. So let's go to the eForms, and I'll do this with you so that you guys can kind of see how it's done. All right, so I'm going to go to create a new eForm here. And the way that we're going to be doing it is first we're going to add a new component under File. Then we'll hide the label. Under here, the storage, we're going to select base64, display as image. And then under data, we can attach some data. So I'm going to just drag and drop my file here. I have a Therefore logo that I just drag and drop from my desktop. Let's make this larger again. And there you go. Then you can see a little preview of Therefore. So I'm hiding the label. The storage is base64. And here, this has to be also disabled. All right, so then once we have disabled hidden, we have hide label, data here, we can save it, and you can see the file has been uploaded. All in all, it's pretty easy, but there's a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, let's go back over here again. If you want to change the size of this file, you can change it here under image size. If we have 200 pixels, we can make it larger. Say it's 400 pixels instead. So this is a number of pixels, so you can change the size. And we can also do a little bit of formatting. By default, it's going to be left aligned. So if you want to change where it is a little bit, you can add. There's a couple of workarounds that you can do. You can either add white space around the image to make it larger or to make it more centered. You can use columns, or you can use tables also. So here's a table, column, and you can put those images within those elements. One thing to keep in mind though is that you cannot add this image into another component. Like you can't add it into a radio button, for example. The radio button is the one where you can, just to remind you, is this one where you can have different options. Like this. So you can't add an image within the radio button. That doesn't work. So the image at this point is kind of like a standalone option. But I did do some playing around, and I wanted to show you what I did with the images just to make the formatting a little bit nicer. So let me go to my folders here, and here's my form. So what I have here in the center is I have this image. This is for fictitious company, Moyaware Christmas Party. If you guys have been around there for some time, you'll recall that Moyaware is a fake company that we made up many years ago, and we just like to use it for our demos. So here is the Moyaware Christmas Party survey. It's an image which I centered by adding white space to it. Then I have first and last name. Let's call her Sally Smith, and she's being asked, will you attend the Christmas party? So she can say yes. Then I have a conditional field here where she can select the meal for the Christmas party: salmon, curry, or chicken. So she wants salmon. And you can see here, there's 3 images of 3 different meals. The way that I formatted these images here is I did a table, and then underneath each table, I had a checkbox. And there's some JavaScript on the checkboxes so that if one is selected, the other 2 disappear. So this is just kind of a workaround to show you what can be done with the images. So do you have any dietary restrictions? If she says like yes, then we can say she's allergic to peanuts, and the submission is complete. So again, there are ways that you can format the images, but at this time it's quite limited. So the next feature that we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at saving a draft form. This is a really useful feature because it enables users to save a draft version of a form to the eForms designer. So what are the basics about it? Users can receive a link where they can retrieve their submission and continue working on it at a later time. This draft form works for both authenticated and non-authenticated users. Authenticated users will be able to access all drafts via the designer. When they log in, they'll have a new section in the eForms designer where all their drafts are saved. And non-authenticated users will just have a link. So non-authenticated users really need to make sure that they take care of the link that they have if they want to re-access the form at a later time. One thing to keep in mind is that the mechanism right now for saving draft forms only saves the draft forms to the eForms designer. It doesn't save the form actually to the Therefore system. So commonly I get asked, how can you use draft forms in a workflow? And right now it's not possible to integrate a draft submission with a workflow because a workflow only works once the submission has been actually saved to the Therefore system. At the moment, remember, the draft forms are just staying within the eForms designer. So saving a draft form, the configuration is really easy. You just add a button component to the form, then you just select Save Draft as an action underneath the display tab, and then you can optionally change the theme, which changes the color of the button, and then you can save the form. Let's try doing that. I'm going to open up the Solution Designer, and I'm going to create a new eForm right here. We'll call this Draft Submission. So what I need to do is I need to add this button component. Then I can change the label to Save Draft. And then, as I mentioned before, you can also select the color underneath theme, which is here. So the default is blue, but you can also change it to a turquoise color, a red color. Maybe we'll just stick with blue and save it. And then just for testing purposes, I will also add a text field here. We'll call this name. All right. Then I'm going to save the form. We'll add some test data. Submit it. And then back here, draft. I'm going to test data 1. We can save the draft. So we'll change the name here. Update. And then you can see here in my list of drafts, I have this one, draft 1 here. I also have a list of some other applications here that I filled out. Here I have a job application, which I think is a pretty typical use case scenario for something there where you'd want to have the draft submissions. So you can see here, this is a long form where there's a lot of information that needs to be filled out: education, previous employment, document upload. And this is a classic case where you would really want to have the ability to save the draft, because a form like this takes a lot of time to fill out. If you're an anonymous user, I want to show you what it looks like as an anonymous user, because if you're an anonymous user, you won't have access to the forms designer. So here is the link. I added the allow anonymous flag at the end. So what you can see here, if I fill out this form here, last name, of course, Smith, first name is Mary. I can save the draft. And because I'm an anonymous user in this case, I can only copy the link right here. So if I copy this to the clipboard, I can then open it up and return to it at a later time. But there isn't any way for me to save it to the forms designer as an anonymous user. So this is really useful. I hope that you get some good use out of it. Don't forget that you really need to add that draft submissions button every single time that you want a user to be able to fill out a draft version of the form. And that was the link that I used here. Next, the next new feature in the eForms is that you're able to set the parameters for HTML. So that means using HTML, you're able to pre-populate certain fields within an eForm. And this is pretty cool because you're really able to make it a lot easier for users to fill out a form by pre-populating certain fields. And so example uses would be if you have a special booking link for like a group discount code maybe, and if you're a hotel or a bed and breakfast. If you are filling out a job application form and you want to pre-fill the job that the person is applying for. So for example, if you have a website, you might have a list of open positions at the company, and each link would direct the job applicant to the job application form, and of course the job that they're applying for will be pre-filled. At a university or some type of school, maybe you want to have information about a semester already pre-filled in. At a construction site, you'd have certain information perhaps filled in about that specific construction site. The options are endless. And so the use case is that you have a certain form. You don't want to recreate the form every single time. Or maybe you're using the same form for numerous cases, such as a job application form. You'd have numerous jobs open. The application form is more or less the same. It's just the job that the person is applying for is different, depending on which link they select. And you want to just make it easier. Keep in mind that this feature is in addition to the other options that we had for pre-populating the form. So you're still able to pre-populate the form using macros. You're still able to use it with default fields. So it doesn't replace any of the options that we already had. It's just another option that you have to use in your toolkit to create the perfect form. Right, so it's just an addition to using default fields and macros. All right. How does this work? How do you do HTML parameters? It's really actually quite easy. So we have a base path URL So of course you have your server, which is the web access, TWA, of course, if you're using an installed system, /forms/embed, which should be similar. You should recognize this if you've been using forms already. You'll see that this part is easy. Then you have to enter the form number, question mark, and then the field property name equals, and then whatever you want there to be. And of course, you can pre-populate numerous fields at once. To do this, you need to add an and sign, the ampersand, in between. And at the end, you can also add the allow anonymous suffix to make that field available for anonymous users. All right, so again, just a couple of things to keep in mind. I had problems doing this because the system that I'm using doesn't support HTTPS. I just can use HTTP. So here is my link for the job application form. As you can see right here, the way I'm doing it is I'm following this pattern here precisely. So until embed, and then I have a form number. In this case, my form number is number 2, question mark. Then my field property name is which job are you applying for. So all of this here, and then I'm writing equals, and then the field value that I want is QA engineering. And then at the end, I'm adding the allow anonymous equals 1 flag. One of the questions that you might have right now is, where does the field property name come from? How do I know what that is? Very easy. Let's open up the job form. And we want to edit it so that we can see what the field property name is. So this is the field here that we want to pre-populate. So I click on this little wheel, say edit, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto the API tab, and it says property name here. So if you watch the Experts Update with Wolfgang, he refers to this as the API name. This is the API tab, and the property name, which job are you applying for, is what you will be using to create the HTML parameters. This is also the same field that you are using when you want to create conditional elements on the eForm. So this is definitely something that you have done before. If you've done anything with the eForms before, this field is very familiar for you. So once you know what your property name is, you want to copy it. So select and copy, and you want to put it onto a notepad, or you want to put it into some document. Do not try to type this up by hand. You will make mistakes, and that will cost you time, and it's just unnecessary. Copy and paste the property name. As you can see here, the property name might have some strange upper and lower cases. It might be very long. So don't trust yourself. Just copy it, put it in, and then do it like that. So again, very, very simple. And then after you have, let's move this over here. So you can see here, after you have your field property name, you write the question mark. Excuse me. After you have your field property name, you write an equal sign, and then you write your field value. What do you want there to be in your in the eForm? What should be entered? And then at the end, do it like that. So if you want allow anonymous users to have access to this form, you write allow anonymous. If it's only for internal use, you can take that off. So let's give it a try. Let me stick on here. I'm going to close this, open up an incognito window, and you can see here we have this pre-filled, and it works. I like to use incognito windows when I'm using demos or testing, just because they make sure that there's nothing cached, and so you can really test a form as if you were logging on from another system. It's another little easy way. All right, so one easy thing that you can do, of course, you can add as many fields as you want. to the form, so you can pre-populate numerous fields. Just as an example here, here's the PowerPoint. So we have another example here where we're adding pre-populated fields for the first and last name. The way this is done is you just add the ampersand in between each of the fields. So again, I have an and, then I have last name equals Smith, last name is the property name, and again an and sign, first name equals Sally, and then I'm adding the allow anonymous flag at the end. So let's test this out again. So we'll go over to Chrome, put that in, and we can see here these fields are pre-populated. So, and you can do this for any type of form. Just look into the property name. It will get a little bit more complicated with tables, and here we recommend really taking the time to look over what the context is for those HTML parameters. And of course, our pre-sales team will be happy to help if you have any more complicated questions for pre-population. All right. Those are the new features that are in the eForms. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a little bit of a review of features that aren't necessarily new, but I've gotten a lot of questions about them, and so I'm just going to review a little bit. All right. Let's move over here. So the first thing that I wanted to say about the licensing, I did a lot of talking about anonymous users, and I got a lot of questions last time, so I'm just going to review this again. So authenticated users are users who have a Therefore license. They access the eForms either through the Therefore Navigator, or they access it from the solution designer and they open it up. So they're really using Therefore to access the eForm. A non-authenticated user is an external user who is like an anonymous user, like I showed before. And those types of users only have access to the Therefore system if the Therefore system is a business edition or an enterprise edition, or if they're using an online system that has at least 10 users. If you're using a Therefore online system and you have fewer than 10 users, non-authenticated users are not supported. All right. And of course, smaller Therefore editions like Workgroup Edition do not support non-authenticated users. Especially, this is something really important to keep in mind, especially if you have a demo license. Most demo licenses have fewer than 10 users, so if you're wanting to use your demo license on Therefore Online to use these features for anonymous users, make sure to get some more licenses so that you can trust it. All right. And to create an anonymous forms user, there's a little bit of configuration involved. First, ensure your system is licensed appropriately. Check, we got that. So next step is you create an anonymous user in the solution designer, and you need to appropriately restrict rights to the category or folder. So first step is you just create a regular Therefore user. You can name them anonymous user, for example, and you need to make sure that they have rights to access the forms that you want them to have access to. But at the same time, you don't want them to have too many rights for security reasons, so you need to appropriately restrict the rights to the category or folder where the eForms will be saved. Then you open Web Access. You set the anonymous user under Settings, Upload Anonymous Forms User. And so here we go, here's Therefore Settings. Then you say under Upload, and here's the anonymous forms user. You need to enter the username and password of that anonymous forms user, and then you click Configure. And then it says OK, and that's it. So it's pretty simple, but extremely important if you want to use the anonymous forms. Most of the examples that I shared with you for use case scenarios were actually for anonymous users. So that's why I felt it necessary just to give you a little bit of a review on this, just so that you're really clear on what the use case scenario will be. And of course, if you are using eForms and you want the eForm to be available for anonymous forms, or the draft submissions, if you want those new draft submissions to be available for anonymous users, you will definitely need to have the anonymous forms user configured. So keep that in mind. Please do not forget to do this, otherwise it will not work. Another thing, this is not new, but it's perhaps underutilized. We have an HTML component on the eForms designer. This is pretty cool. It can be used to insert text. It can be used to insert links to other pages. One example that I got from one of our BDMs was they wanted to have a form on their website, and of course there were terms and conditions at the bottom. And those terms and conditions, as you know, can be really long. And so what they did is they just used HTML to insert a link to terms and conditions rather than inserting it all in the same eForm. You can open links to another tab, you can use various headings, and you can use various colors, which is pretty cool. So let me just show you an example of a form that uses various HTML components. All right, so here is my, my form that uses the various HTML components. I don't know how much HTML experience you guys have on this call. So because I don't know how much explanation to give, I'm going to just show you what there is, and then I'll give you some like pointers when you go ahead and try it out by yourself. So what we are going to do is I'm going to open it up actually in the edit mode so that I can show you how the configuration is. So what we have here is we just have an HTML component and it says italic header. So what I did here is I inserted the HTML component, and what you can see here is under the content I was actually just using just regular HTML. Here we have the tags, the I, and then we close the I, and this tells it to make it italic. A use case for this would be, for example, if you have a form and you want to provide some information where the user doesn't actually have to enter any text, that could be really useful for that. Keep in mind that if you're entering like a text box, it always comes with the input component where the user is asked to enter some data. So by using this, you can actually provide the user with information that might be really useful. Then here I have two examples of text boxes. As you might recall from my previous webinar, you're actually able to use custom CSS classes with HTML to do a little bit of customization within text boxes. So here is a text box. We'll open it up. And under layout, I added the attribute name style and the background color. And here you can just write background / color, colon, and then put in the color you want. Yellow, red, blue, powder blue, pink, all of those colors work. You can just try this at home and see how you like it. It might be really useful if you have some fields that are especially important or you want to draw attention to the fields. Alternatively, what you can also do is you can also change the length of the field. So this is a regular field here. You can see this is the 100%, and this field is significantly shorter. In fact, it's only 25% of the length. And this was also done with the HTML attribute, CSS style. Width was 26%, 25%, there you go. And here is another HTML element, and we have different styles here. So under content, I use the H1. H1 is a header style. This is the largest one. H2 is a little bit smaller. And then here we go. I was also able to change the font of the text here to Garamond, and it's also italic. So you can use the HTML in a lot of ways, just as if you were on a website. There are a couple of restrictions that I found because I did a little bit of playing around. It seems to me that you can't change the font of a text field, and I also had trouble adding numerous customizations at once within the text field. So the text fields are quite limited, but if you're using the pure HTML component, it seems to be really flexible. This is the terms and conditions. This is something that's actually really useful, and I want to show this in detail. If we open this up, so what I do here is I have another HTML component, and what I do is here I'm referencing a site, the target blank, by adding, so href equals, in quotes, you want to reference the website where the terms and conditions are. In my case, I'm just referencing our homepage, www.therefore.net. And then I'm entering target equals quote blank. And here what you see, this will enable the eForm to open up the terms and conditions in a separate page. You want to make sure that you're doing that, because if you don't enter it, if the user clicks on the terms and conditions, they'll be redirected to that page, and then they won't be able to get back to their eForm. So definitely, if you're doing it like this, enter target equals blank. And then here we have the terms and conditions, and then at the end, we're just closing our quotes. Again, we have started out here with an A, and then that means we also have to close it here at the end with this line. So in general, with HTML, you always need to open and you always need to close it. Just like we saw with italics, again, we saw the I opening, the header being written in, and then the I was being closed again. Same thing here. Like I said, HTML is pretty simple to learn. There are a lot of online help pages available. So I would really encourage you to take a look, play around with it a little bit, and try to use it in your forms if you think it could be useful. So again, this is just something that might be useful to you. And again, here in the testing thing, we can see we're entering, pardon me, doctor, name. My hands aren't in the right spot. And then here are the terms and conditions. So you can see here it's opening up a website, and then they can go back to the eForms and submit. So that's something that might be useful to you. Have some fun with it. Right, moving on, I just wanted to show you how you can change the date format in the eForms. The standard format in the eForms, if you're using the date and time component, is year, month, date. Many people don't like that format, and so they would like to have month, day, year, or day, month, year. If you follow the link here, you can see that there's actually a lot of different options for changing the date and time format. Let's go have a look. So here is a sample eForm that I have here. Let's open it up with the date and time. So as you can see here, this is the standard input for the date, where it's year, month, date. The way that we can change it is we can actually go in here, and then here under date, we can actually override system preferences. So for example, we could do month, day, year. And here, if you open up the link here, the date parser codes, this will actually give you a lot more information about how you can change the date to suit your needs. Then we can save it, test the form. So you can see here now it's month, day, year. And then if we go back to designing the form again, we could change it to a different format again. So day, month, year. And there you have it. It's pretty simple. Yay, the Forms Designer has been translated. So this means that the designer itself has been translated into all the languages in which therefore software is available. And the UI of the Forms Designer is now shown in the language of the browser, which is really important to note because it also changes the format of the currency. Some of you might be aware that different countries in the world actually write currency amounts in different ways, just like we write date amounts in different ways. So for example, in the US, if you want to say $12,345 and 67 cents, you write 12,345.67. However, in Europe, it's the other way around. $12,345 is actually written 12.345,67. So you can see it's reversed. This is obviously something that's really important. Coming from the US, now living in Austria, I can tell you when I first moved to Austria, it was really confusing for me because I actually thought it was I didn't realize that the comma and the period had been switched, and so for me it was really confusing to read money amounts. And so that's why the language of the browser is what determines the input method of the currency, because it's something that really needs to be adapted to the user who's using the form, because we can't afford there to be mistakes with that. Otherwise, you might have a user who wants to buy something for, $1.20 and might be actually ring 1,020 cents. So, yeah, it's really important. How does this work? And then when it's actually saved into the therefore system, the index data is then saved in therefore according to the therefore system preferences. So the user will enter the data as it sees as it's correct for him according to the browser, but then therefore system is intelligent enough to convert those amounts to however the administrator of the therefore system has configured the currency amounts to be set. So don't worry about that. On the end, all of the data input will be saved the same to the therefore system. So you're not going to have different entries depending on the browsers, but for the users, the currency amounts will be shown in the way that makes sense to them according to their system preferences. So how do we change this? It's very simple. You just change the language of your browser. So let's try that. Okay, let's just go over and open up my browser, and we will see how easy it is to see the currency. So let me just test the form here really quickly. So my browser, as you can see here, it's in English. The UI is in English. It's in American English. So if I want to say 12 euros and 45 cents or 123 euros and 45 cents, it's in euros. All right, we'll submit it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my settings, language, and now I'm going to change my language here. So I'm going to put German, display Google Chrome in this language, relaunch. All right, now it says settings, it says Einstellungen. So you guys, if you don't speak German already, this is your opportunity. All right, so now you can see here I've relaunched my browser. Instead of all folders, it says Alle Ordner. And this part here hasn't been changed because this is something that I configured as the form. So let's test the form now. Let's put in the date and the currency. Now we had 123 and 45 cents. And you can see when I put the period, it automatically made it, this is the 123 user and 45 cents. There we go. And we can now submit. So we have a new e-signature integration. So we already had e-signature integration with DocuSign, and now in this new version we have 2 additional integrations with SimpleSign and uSign. Plus, it's of course possible to create custom integrations with other providers. The service can be adapted to additional providers if you choose. In case you're not aware, what's an e-signature provider? It provides end users a way to digitally sign the documents quickly and securely. Those documents are sent to them via a workflow task. They sign it electronically, and then the content connector picks up those signed documents and saves it to the therefore system. So it's a very, very efficient and easy way. It really closes the loop for companies who often need to send out their documents for signature. Common types of use cases would be, for example, a real estate company who signs out lease agreements, an insurance company who needs to send out contracts for signing, anything where a customer has a lot of documents that are sent out, they need to be signed and then returned. This is a really, really nice solution that just closes the loop in terms of getting those signed documents back into the therefore system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly show you an example of how this works. Like I mentioned before, we have 2 new out-of-the-box integrations available with uSign and SimpleSign. I'll be using uSign today, but the mechanism is basically the same regardless of which e-signature provider you use. In my demo, I'm going to be signing a lease agreement for, of course, Moyaware real estate company. So here we go. Here is my category. Here is my document. Property address is 123 Moya Road. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the workflow. And it's going to send a task to Kathy Garcia, who is going to be signing this lease. So let's open up her mailbox and see if she has already received the email. All right, so here is the document. So you can see she received an email using a template. All this information here was selected in. So I need to select the date that we're signing it. And then at the end here, she can sign it. And it's signed, verified by Simple Sign. And then we're all done. So what we're going to do now is, as I mentioned before, the content connector is then going to pick up this document and save it back to therefore. The polling interval is automatically 15 minutes, but because it's a demo, and I know you guys want to go home at some time, I'm going to just restart the therefore content connector service very easily. We're just going to restart it here. Close it, and then let's go check back into our category. And you can see here the document has been signed and verified by Simple Sign. The background, the way that this was configured, was actually quite easy. We have a category, we have a signing. So what you can see here, this is a workflow task where you just configure which e-signature provider you want to use. Here are the template forms, template places where you have to configure the fields. And then there's also the content connector, where you can configure the content connector if it's, and you can also change, should the document, the signed document, be saved back into the original category, should it be saved into something else, that can all be configured. And like I said before, this integration now works with Simple Sign, uSign, as well as DocuSign, which was already available. So I hope that this is something that's interesting for you. I think it's a really nice solution for customers who require a lot of documents to be sent out for signature. And now with this new therefore workflow task, it's easier than ever to use it with some of these new e-signature providers. So that brings us to the very end of our demo and our webinar today. This webinar will be recorded, so you'll be able to watch it on the extranet or on YouTube. Also check out the experts update. The recording is also available online. It features our developers talking about these very same features. And last but not least, please give me some feedback. We've got a QR code on the screen, and there's also a link here which I'll copy into the chat box. Thank you so much.